Imagine America, the country that proclaimed itself defender of human rights, quietly building an arsenal of disease. This is the story of a program so dangerous it was never supposed to be used, yet was closer to deployment than most of us realize. People assume biological weapons are a villain of others' story. Nazi madmen, Unit 731, shadowy dictators. But the hard truth is more complicated. In the mid-20th century, the United States, driven by fear, rivalry, and real wartime experience, organized a vast, offensive biological weapons effort. It had personnel, facilities, test programs, and contingency plans. It wasn't fantasy. It was institutional, bureaucratic, and operational. And for decades, its footprint shaped policy, science, and secrecy in ways that still matter today. WI lessons to WU programs. After World War I, policymakers understood the scale of damage chemical and biological agents could cause. That memory lingered into World War II. The U.S. Army Chemical Warfare Service formalized research efforts in the 1940s, not only into defensive measures, but into offensive capability as well. Fort Detrick in Maryland emerged as the nerve center, a campus packed with microbiologists, engineers, and military planners tasked with turning theory into a deployable option. What they built: agents, delivery, and doctrine. This wasn't limited to one germ in a bottle. The program explored multiple agents, many of them diseases that kill or incapacitate, methods to produce them at scale, and ways to deliver them from aerial sprays to contaminated food, to covert dissemination. Scientists tested aerosolization techniques, environmental persistence, and even how different climates changed lethality. Reports from the era show military planners asked brutal, practical questions. How many square miles could an aerosol cover? How quickly would a population be disabled? Those questions were operational, not academic. Testing and experiments the human and ethical shadows. The line between research and atrocity blurred. The program ran field tests, sometimes in controlled but still public environments, releasing benign tracers to understand spread. Other research crossed ethical lines. Experiments on animals in large numbers, open-air tests in which unwitting populations were potentially exposed to simulants, and even investigations into human vulnerability that today would be recognized as deeply problematic. These were not Hollywood conspiracies. They were files, memos, and reports. Bureaucratic artifacts of a government wrestling with fear. Cold War pressure, escalation, and contingency planning. As WWP ended, the Cold War began, and with it, an arms race not just of missiles and nukes, but of microbes. The Soviet Union's own programs, reports of Japanese Unit 731's wartime crimes, and intelligence uncertainty pushed U.S. planners to assume the worst case. Adversaries might use disease as a weapon. The result: programs accelerated. Plans for retaliation in kind and stockpiling offensive agents entered documents. The U.S. military drafted doctrines that treated biological weapons as another instrument of national power, terrible, but imaginable in the calculus of deterrence. The unit in practice. Organization and secrecy. If you think of this as a single unit, picture a patchwork of teams, Fort Detrick's scientists and production facilities, the Chemical Corps' logisticians, military planners drawing target lists and deployment timelines, contractors building production lines, intelligence analysts gauging enemy programs. They were compartmentalized for secrecy but integrated for capability. People who worked there later described a culture of mission-first thinking, where ethical qualms were subordinated to the perceived necessity of national survival. Near deployments and operations that worried historians. There were moments when the program came close to operational posture. During the Korean War and later crises, some planning documents explored use scenarios. More concrete were programs like SHAD, Shipboard Hazard and Defense, and related tests during the 1950s-60s where ships and troops were exposed to simulants to study vulnerabilities. Those tests revealed glaring risks to sailors, civilians, and the environment, and they hardened public and internal scrutiny. But perhaps most consequential was the recognition, within policy circles, that a biological arsenal could be produced and delivered. That meant the program had to be treated not as theory, but as a real, terrifying option on the table. That reality is what makes the story chilling. This was not a parlor room debate. It was capability plus planning. The ethical inflection, Nixon's decision, and its consequences. Then came a pivotal political decision. In 1969, President Richard Nixon announced the unilateral renunciation of the U.S. offensive biological weapons program. He ordered the destruction of stockpiles and placed the U.S. on a course toward a different posture research for defense, not offense. Nixon's move was revolutionary. It reframed the arms race and set a new precedent for restraint. But it did not erase the legacy labs. Trained personnel, institutional secrecy, and test records remained. That infrastructure and expertise shaped biodefense and raised persistent moral questions about programs that had ever been considered deployable. Aftermath, legacy, and the haunting question. After Nixon, the program's outward face changed. Offensive programs were officially dismantled. Defensive labs proliferated. Treaties like the Biological Weapons Convention attempted to codify the ban. Yet the technical knowledge, the people, and some classified records persisted. The secrecy around human experimentation allegations and the post-war handling of captured Axis scientists has been criticized by historians, suggesting geopolitics sometimes trumped justice. The final, uncomfortable truth is this. The unit America never meant to deploy was built out of fear, and it was only political will that chose to not use it. The capacity had been created. Deployment remained a political choice. That choice saved many lives, but it also left a record we must study, because the same pressures exist today. When fear races ahead of ethics, history shows us the shape of the danger. We call it a nightmare because it contains both the cold calculus of national survival and the human cost that follows. The story of this unit is a mirror. It asks us, can a democracy build instruments of mass suffering and still call itself moral? The answer depends on the choices we make when fear is loudest.